Masechet Ketubot of Kof Chet. We began this perek talking about Hanan and Admon, the judges of Jerusalem, and we already mentioned one halacha taught by Hanan. We're going to learn today 3 mishnayot, the second halacha by Hanan, and 2 of the 7 laws that were taught by Admon. So here is the second one of Hanan. A man goes away on a trip and does not leave provisions for his wife, and someone else, a friend, we'll call him, comes and he provides sustenance for the wife who is at home. And so then eventually the husband does come back, and this friend wants to be paid back for the money that he laid out for his friend's wife. So Hanan Omer ibed et me'otav. Hanan says, sorry, he loses his money. The friend cannot be paid back. If the husband, before he left, had asked the friend, hey, can you lend me some money and provide for my wife while I'm away, then yes, he would have to pay back. But the husband did not ask. The friend just did it on his own. So since the husband did not ask him, Hanan says, okay, he gave a nice gift to this wife, but he does not get paid back. However, the sons of the Kohanim Gedolim disagree with Hanan in this case as well, and say that the friend can swear how much he spent providing for his friend's wife, and he can collect the money from the husband. Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas, as before, they agree with Bnei Kohanim Gedolim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, whereas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai agrees with Hanan just as he did before, and he gives an example. It's like if you put your money on the horn of a deer, right, and the deer is running. So you're not going to expect to get that money back. The same thing, right? If you take your money and you give it to this woman, no one asked you to give it to her to provide for her. If she wants to go to court and demand it, right? She has other ways, but no one asked you to give it to her. So it's like you put your money on the horn of a deer, and therefore you do not have a right to ask for it back. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to compare this case with another Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim, and we're going to use the opinion of Hanan to help us explain one of the clauses in this Mishnah. Tananatam, hamudarana amechavero shokel lo et shiklo upore et hobo machazir lo abedato. If there's 2 people and one makes a vow that I will not derive benefit from you, so even though they cannot derive benefit from each one from the other, and so one can't give a gift to the other or anything like that. Nevertheless, one of them can give machasita shekel on behalf of his friend, and that's not called giving him benefit. We'll see why in the Talmud. And also, he can pay back that guy's loan. For example, if there's a lender and a borrower out there, the borrower owes money back to the lender, and I say I'm not going to give any benefit to this borrower, then I am still allowed to go to the lender and pay back the borrower's loan on his behalf. I give him the money. That is permitted. We'll discuss that also. Machazir bedato is even if I said I'm not going to benefit someone, but I find this guy's donkey somewhere on the road, and I can return it to him, and that does not violate the vow. The Mishnah ends and says, in a place where there is sachar, makom shenotnin sachar tipol hana'al lehekdesh, if normally, when in the case when I return your donkey, I should get paid for that trouble that I spent, that time that I spent going and getting this donkey and finding you and returning it. Well, normally you're supposed to pay me for that time, but since we vowed that we will not benefit each other, so you can't give me the money. Nevertheless, you still have to give that money somewhere. And since you made a vow that you're not going to give any benefit to me, so that money will go to Hekdesh, it will go to the Bet HaMikdash. So the giving of the returning of the item is not considered a benefit, but the payment for returning the item is considered a benefit. Okay, so let's explain each of these. So we understand why even if I say I'm not going to give you any benefit, but I can still pay your machasita shekel, because I'm doing a mitzvah. After all, the Mishnah says it's not. Actually, it's a braita that says, so we could maybe change it to Detanya, says that one can, that in Bet HaMikdash, when they collect the Machazit HaShekel, they collect lots of Machazit HaShekel, they put in the chamber. Then every once in a while, when they need, they take baskets and they withdraw a certain amount. When they withdraw, they have in mind that they're going to include in the communal sacrifice the people who lost their money. Maybe they sent Machazit HaShekel, but it got lost on the way. They'll also be included in the communal sacrifice. In other words, not every single Machazit HaShekel is going to end up being used to buy the Korban Tamid and other communal sacrifices. Only some of them, because there's a lot of extra. But the people that the Kohanim who collect it say, we're going to take these shekalim and going to have in mind everyone else also, even someone who may have donated but it got lost. Val hagabui, or that's been gathered but didn't make it here yet. Maybe they put it in a basket in their local city but didn't get to the Bet HaMikdash yet. We have them in mind. They're included in the communal sacrifices that we will buy. And even if someone didn't yet get a chance to give Machazit HaShekel, the Kohanim say we'll have them in mind also. In other words, everyone is included in the communal offerings, even if they didn't yet give Machazit HaShekel. Therefore, this guy also, my friend, or my enemy, who I said I'm not going to benefit from him, I'm allowed to give Machazit HaShekel on his behalf, since he actually is not deriving any benefit. Even if he didn't give Machazit HaShekel, and even if I didn't give on his behalf, no one gave on his behalf, he would still be included in the mitzvah of Korban Tamid and all other communal sacrifices, because they have him in mind anyway. So I'm just, I'm benefiting the Bet HaMikdash that they get an extra half shekel, so that's why that's permitted. Also, if I return his item, his donkey, I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm doing it because Torah says, if you find a donkey, return it. So that's why I'm doing it. He owns the donkey anyway. So I'm not giving him any more money that he didn't have before. I'm just doing this mitzvah of returning it. So that's permitted, even though I said I'm not going to benefit him. But in this Mishnah it says I'm allowed to pay off his debt, right? Even if I make a vow, I'm not going to do anything good for this borrower. I can go to the lender and pay off the debt on behalf of the borrower. But isn't that actually giving him a real financial benefit? Now he won't have to pay the debt back anymore. So that's our question. So Rav Oshaya says, the author of the Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim, by the way, it's really nice, we're learning Mishnah Masechet Nedarim now. It's a little preview for the next Masechet coming up. Just in a few days, we'll start Masechet Nedarim. So maybe that's why we're discussing it here. So Rav Oshaya says the author of the Mishnah Nedarim is none other than Hanan in our Mishnah, who said that if one person, a friend, who goes and gives money to the wife on behalf of the husband, he lost his money, right? So even though he is giving money that the husband would owe, the husband can come back and say, I didn't ask you to pay it back, and I'm not paying you back. So it's not considered any benefit. So to here, Hanan would say that even though I am paying back the lender, so that's good for the lender. He has his money, but I can't actually go back to the borrower and say, pay me back because I paid the money for you. He can say, I didn't ask you to do that, right? It have nothing to do with you. Okay, so now we solved that problem. That's one answer, Rav Oshaya. We have a second answer. We'd rather that this Mishnah and Nedarim not be only the opinion of Hanan. It would be nice if it followed everyone's opinion. So Rav says, I can follow all the opinions. The Mishnah in Nedarim is talking about a case where the lender lent money on condition that says you don't have to pay it back at any point in time, right? It's open-ended. There is no due date. Since a loan without a due date is almost like a gift. I mean, he does have to pay it back, but if there's no due date, then really, if I come and I pay back the loan on behalf of the borrower doesn't get any benefit because the borrower's like, I really didn't have to pay it back anytime anyway. I could have waited 100 years. And so the fact that you pay back doesn't help me. And that could follow even the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, that normally they would say, yes, if I pay back someone's loan, I can go back and say, give it back to me. Like the friend can go to the husband and say, I paid your obligation, so pay me back. Even according to that, if it's a case like this, where there's no due date, then he would agree that there is no benefit. Okay, so now we have Rabbi Oshaya and Rabbi Rava, Rav Oshaya and Rava, who gave two answers. How come they disagreed with each other? Bishlama Rava lo amar ke Rav Oshaya demokem la ke Rabbanan. We understand that Rava did not want to follow Rabbi Rav Oshaya because he wanted to establish the Mishnah Nedarim according to all opinions, not only Hanan. So that's why Rava's is better. El Rav Oshaya ma'tamar lo amar ke Rava. How come Rav Oshaya didn't agree with Rava if it's better? Amar lach Rav Oshaya dehi dahana'a let le kisufa mi letle. So answer Rav Oshaya says it's true that in a case where there's no due date, I pay back the person's loan for him that has no due date, so I didn't give him any financial benefit because he wouldn't have to pay for forever anyway. Nevertheless, there's still shame, right? If I owe someone money, even if they don't ask for it back and there's no due date, still every time I see him, I feel embarrassed. Oh, I borrowed money. I do have to pay that person back. And now, if someone pays back the loan on my behalf, so now I don't feel embarrassed anymore. So that's why. Hatam name it lehana'a b'hiana'a demichsif mine. And so too in a case where there is no due date, even if there's no absolute financial benefit, because I don't have to pay now anyway. But now I do get a benefit that I don't have to feel ashamed anymore. And so that is also considered a benefit, and so would be a problem according to Bnei Kohanim Gedolim. And that's why Rav Oshaya says better to say that this Mishnah is only the opinion of Hanan. All right, next Mishnah. Admon Omer Shiva. Admon taught 7 laws. Here's the first. Mi shemet v'hiniach banim ubanot bizman shenechasim merubin habanim yorshim v'banot nizonot. A man dies and he leaves behind sons and unmarried daughters. If there is sufficient funds, a lot of funds in the estate, then the sons inherit and the daughters are fed. Right? The sons inherit. That's a doraita law. The sons, if there are sons, the sons inherit. But the estate does have to pay the daughters. The daughters don't get inheritance, but they do get food, sustenance. The Rabbanan law. That until they get married, they get sustenance. So if there's sufficient funds, fine, we can pay for all that. But if there's insufficient funds and there is only enough in the estate to pay for the daughters to eat for, let's say, 1 year, then the daughters take precedence. The daughter's sustenance takes precedence and they get all the money, and the sons will not get anything, will not get any inheritance. So even though the inheritance is a biblical law, nevertheless, it's degrading for daughters to have to go and beg. It's degrading for anyone to have to go and beg, but it's worse for girls. And so therefore, the boys will have to go begging. Because there is no inheritance, there's not even enough for them to sustain them. That's the opinion of Chachamim. Admon, however, disagrees. Admon omer, bishvil shani zachar ifsadeti. Admon says, just because I'm a male, I should lose out, right? Why should, if there's insufficient funds, how come the boys will not get anything? Let them at least, split it or something. They should get zero. Rabban Gamliel says, I agree with the words of Admon. Okay, the Gemara is going to elaborate on what Admon meant by this. By this phrase, because I am a male, I lose out. My kamar, what exactly is his argument? We're going to see 2 interpretations. What he meant to say is, because I'm a male and therefore I have a mitzvah to study Torah, I should lose out. In other words, so the boys, they're going to have to go out begging and they won't be able to learn Torah. So this is not fair, right? But rather the boys, if there's insufficient funds, the boys should be able to share some of that also and at least get fed. Amar le Rava, man asik batorah hu deyaret, man de la asik batorah la yaret. Rava counters, says, what does inheritance have to do with learning Torah? Well, I mean, if someone had two boys, all right, and the one learns Torah, one doesn't. What does the one that learns Torah get more of the inheritance, and the other one doesn't get inheritance? We never saw such a thing, right? This doesn't depend on learning Torah or not learning Torah. So it doesn't matter between boys and girls in the mitzvah of learning Torah. It shouldn't make a difference. What he meant to say is, this is kind of paradoxical, according to Chachamim, right? Just because I'm a male, and therefore when there's a lot of money, I get the inheritance, so then I should lose out and get zero when there's less, when there's a small estate, right? How is that fair? Right? If the boys get more when there's a lot of money, so they should at least get, something, when there's a little bit of money, right? Why should it be the complete opposite? This is just a paradox. It doesn't make sense, and that's why they disagree. Okay, the halacha l'maaseh, by the way, in that case, is that when there's insufficient funds, then the girls get paid first. First they get to eat, and only anything left over, if there's anything, goes to the inheritance. To the boys. Okay, last Mishnah. הטוען את חברו קדש שמן והודה בקנקנים אדמון אומר הואיל והודה במקצת הטענה יישבע. Okay, so this is going to be a law regarding modeh b'miksat. The general law of modeh b'miksat is, if you say that I owe you $1,000, and I come and say, no, it never happened, I don't owe you anything, so then you are not believed. And I don't have to swear or anything, right? Assuming that you don't have any proof. However, if you come and say, I owe you $1,000, and I come and say, I did, but I paid you $500. So because I admitted to part of it, I have to make a swear that, in fact, I paid that $500 and I only owe $500. So, in other words, the partial admission, ironically, actually weakens my claim, and then I have to swear. That's the general rule. Now we're going to talk about where there's two items that are claimed, and someone admits on one of the items. So, a person comes to his friend and says, you owe me kadesh shemen, you owe me jugs of oil, and he admitted, yes, I owe you pitchers. Now, the difference is not jugs or pitchers, they're interchangeable. The difference is, are they full or empty? One person says, you owe me full jugs of oil, and the other says, no, I only owe you the jugs. Empty jugs, that's I borrowed from you, but without oil. So Admon says this is called modeh b'miksat. One claimed jugs plus oil, the other one admitted to the jugs, but denied the oil. So therefore, that's modeh b'miksat, and he has to make a vow that I never owed you the oil, but I'll pay you the jugs. Hachamim say, no, these are not the same. The same species, the same category. You claim two things. We separate the jugs and the oil. I completely deny that I ever borrowed from you oil, and so therefore I don't have to make a vow on that. Regarding the jugs, I'll pay the jugs, and so there's no need to make any vow. This is not called modeh b'miksat when you're talking about two different items. Amar Rabban Gamliel Rabban Gamliel agrees with Admon that we consider the claim altogether as one, and it is modeh b'miksat, and you do have to make a vow. All right, now let's focus on Chachamim. Shema min al Rabbanan tanochitim usorim v'oda besorin patur. Just like Chachamim over here say that when the claim is jugs and oil, and then I admit that only with the jugs, I do not have to make a vow. I separate the two claims. So too, sounds like, according to Rabbanan, in another case where we're going to see there is a machloket about this case, if someone claims that someone else owes him wheat and barley, and the other guy says, I do owe you barley, but I don't owe you any wheat. In that case, patur. That case would be patur, right? If that would by analogy, and the reasoning there would be that we separate the claims, right? The claim is there's two different claims, even if he said it at once. You owe me wheat, you owe me barley. One of them he denied in full. One of them he admitted in full. So there's no need to make a vow. It sounds like Rabbanan would say the same thing, or jugs and oil, or whether it's wheat and barley. Now here's the problem. Lema tevet yubtad Rav Nachman amar Shemuel. Damar Rav Nachman amar Shemuel tanoch chitim usorin ve'oda lo be'achad mehen hayav. This, if the Banan really do say patur, in the case of wheat and barley, then this would be a challenge to Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel, who said that if someone claims wheat and barley, and then the other guy admitted in only one of them, he does have to make a vow. In other words, we see the entire claim together, even if it's two different types. And so this would be a challenge to Shemuel. We're going to see in a minute that there is an opposite opinion. And we're going to ask about that also. But for now, this is a challenge to Shemuel. It says, Chayav, Rabbanan say patur, Amarav Yudah Amarav, beto'ano mida. No, we're talking about a case where the claimant in the case of the Mishnah was not jugs and oil, but rather when he said, you owe me a jug full of oil, not the jug, but when he's saying jug, like we would say a gallon, a cup, right? A liter. And so he's saying, you owe me 10 amounts of oil that would fit in 10 jugs. You owe me oil, 10 jugs worth of oil. That's what he said. And that's why he's only requesting oil. And the other guy said, I owe you no oil. I happen to owe you jugs. So this is completely different. The claim was only for oil and not for jugs. So that's how Rav can explain that there was no contradiction. So even Shemuel, who says, yes, if there was a claim of two things and he admitted one thing, he has to make a vow. In the case of the Mishnah, it was only a claim for one thing. But we counter this response. How could Admon possibly say that you do have to make a vow if the claim was only for oil and the admission was only for jugs? Well, then there's no miksat modeh b'miksat here, and so even according to any opinion, you would not have to make a vow. So therefore, we reject Rav and give a second explanation. Ela marav dekula ama hechadama le melo asara kadesh shemin yeshi beborecha. Rav is going to explain that the machloket in the Mishnah between Admon and Rabbanan is actually about how to parse language. And if the language is unclear, which way do we assume, what do we think he means? So everyone agrees that if there's clear language one way or another, then there would be agreement on the outcome. For example, if he says, the one coming to make the claim says, you owe me melo asara kadesh shemen, I own 10 jugfuls of oil that are in your pit. So the oil is in the pit, and he's saying, look, there's a lot of, maybe there's 100 jugfuls of oil, worth of oil in the pit, 100 gallons. But you owe me 10 of them. 10 jugfuls. So obviously here, he's not talking about the jugs, right? There are no jugs. He's only talking about jugs as a measurement of how much oil. Shoshemen kata'in le, kankanim la kata'in le. It's clear that it only means to claim oil. So everyone would agree, Chanan and Chachamim, that if in that case, the other guy came and said, I owe you 0 oil, I only owe you jugs, then that would not be miksat atana, modeh b'miksat, would not be modeh b'miksat, and he does not have to make a vow. If on the other hand he said, Asara kadesh shemen mileim yesh le'etzlecha, I have 10 jugs full of oil, so that means he is claiming both the oil and the pitchers. And in that case, everyone would agree that he's asking for two things, and the other guy admitted on one thing, he admitted the jugs, but not the oil. In that case, he would have to make an oath. This is all according to Shemuel, who says Chitin Sorim is chayav. So in fact, he can explain the Mishnah that Rabbanan also, everyone would agree that this language means two different things. What is the machloket in the Mishnah? If he used more vague language and he says, I have 10 jugs of oil with you, what does that mean? Since he did mention the jugs, then he is claiming the jugs plus the oil. And when the other guy says, I only owe you jugs, it is modeh b'miksat, and he has to make a vow. Rabbanan sabre en balashon hazeh kankanim. Whereas Rabbanan come and say, no, this language, asara kadesh shemen, does not imply that he's claiming jugs. He means 10 jugfuls of oil. And it's the oil only that he is claiming, and the other guy said kankanim only, and that's why it's not modeh b'miksat. So that's the machlok. That's why there's a machloket in the Mishnah. But Rabbanan would agree that if he had clearer language and clearly was claiming only oil, then if he used clear language and was claiming both, then he would have to make a vow, and that would be true for wheat and barley as well. Okay, so that is the answer of Rava's answer to explain Shemuel. Okay, with that answer, however, we're going to turn the question around to the Bichia, who disagreed with Shemuel. So the only reason of that Rabbanan do not require a vow here is because the language in the Mishnah, according to them, they parse the language that there's no claim for jugs, and that's why, since there was no claim for jugs, there's no bodem miksat. Hayesh b'lashon hazeh lashon kankanim chayav. But if there were a claim for jugs, then he would have to make a vow. Lema tevet yubtad Bichia bar Abad, amar Bichia bar Abad, hanochitim usodim v'odav lo be'echad mehem patur. So now, Rava, according to your interpretation of the Mishnah, we will have a challenge to the Bichia. Because the Bichia said, if someone claims wheat and barley, and the other guy admitted one of them, then patur, he does not have to make a vow, because we separate the two. The wheat and the barley are separable, and therefore he admitted one fully, and he denied one fully. There's no modeh b'miksat. But this would be a challenge, according to your interpretation of the Mishnah, where Rabbanan would say chayav. So how is Bichia going to answer this? Amarav Shimi bar Asher na'asa kemi she'ta'ano rimon bekelipato. So Rav Shimi says the case of the Mishnah is not like wheat and barley. It's more like if someone claims, hey, you owe me a pomegranate and its peel. A pomegranate needs the peel. You can't separate one from the other, because then it'll go bad. And so that is considered one claim. And if the other guy says, "Oh no, I only owe you peels. I only owe you the insides of the pomegranate," then that is still modeh b'miksat, and you don't. He would have to make a vow. So this is different from wheat and barley, because wheat and barley are clearly separable. So Rav Shimi is saying that the oil and the pitcher are like a rimon, like a pomegranate and its peel, and oil and pitcher are not separable, and that's why even the Rabbanan would agree that in the case of wheat and barley, those are separable, so it's two different claims and patur. But in the Mishnah is talking about oil and jugs, where they are connected and they need each other, and that's why it's chayav. Okay, that's his answer. However, matkif la Ravina, rimon belo kilbato lemintar, shemen mintar belo kankanim. Ravina counters that no, our case is not the same as a pomegranate. A pomegranate without its skin is not preserved, right? It's going to go bad after a few hours. Whereas oil can very easily be preserved without pitchers. You put it in a pit, right? Or anything. So it can be preserved in anything that can contain a liquid. It doesn't need a pitcher, and so pitchers and oil can be separated, and therefore are more like wheat and barley, and less like the pomegranate and its leaves, pomegranate and its skin. So Ravina disagrees with that. So rather, how we're going to help the Bichia here? El hacha b'maiskinan damar le asara kadeh shemen yesh li eslecha, v'amar le idach shemen lo hayu devarim me'olam. Kankanim nameh chamisha itlach chamisha letlach. Rather, the Mishnah is talking about a case where the claimant said, "You owe me 10 jugfuls of oil. I have 10 jugfuls of oil with you." So this was that ambiguous language that we mentioned before. The other guy, however, said, "Oil, I never owed you any oil. Regarding the jugs, there I owe you 5, but not the other 5." So he's modeh b'miksat regarding the oil, but regarding the jugs themselves, even though he fully denied the oil. So we're going to assume that, in fact, you can separate two different items, right? That was a bichiyah. That's what we're trying to answer. The bichiyah says that if you have chitim and seorim, those are separable and would be patur. And so here, what's the essence of the machloket? Admon omer yesh b'lashon hazeh lashon kankanim. Admon says that when he says this is the ambiguous language, that it's we assume he means both the oil and the jugs. And so the claim is for both of them. Umigo de And regarding the jugs, within the jugs, but within the jugs, he admitted to only some of them. So it's modeh b'miksat within the jugs. So therefore, he would have to make a vow just for the jugs, right? That I owe you 5 jugs, but not the other 5. We have a concept of gilgul, not reincarnation, but rather rolling one vow into another, which works like this. Even if I wouldn't normally have to make a vow for a certain item, if I'm required to make a vow for a different part of the claim, then we can roll in both vows, and I'd be required to make both vows. So too here, normally, as Rabbi Chia said, if it was oil and jugs, we would separate them like wheat and barley. But in this case, because he admitted part of one item, as if he admitted part of the barley, here he's admitting part of the jugs, so he has to make a vow on that while he's at it making a vow. So then he would have to make a vow on the oil as well. That's what Admon says. Rabbanan sabe en balashon hazeh lashon kankanim ma shetano lo hadalo ma shehodalo lo tano. What does Rabbanan say? This ambiguous language, he says that it means only the oil, and not, there is no claim for jugs at all. And so therefore the claimant said, you owe me oil, and he said no oil at all, and the admission was only for some jugs. But there was no claim for jugs at all, so there is no modeh b'miksat, and that's why Rabbanan say in this case that you do not have to make a vow at all. But if he did use different language where it was clear that he had to pay both oil and jugs, then that would be like wheat and barley. And in that case, yes, if he admitted one but not the other, he would in fact have to make a vow, and that's how we could explain this Mishnah to be consistent with Rabbi Chia. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.